Welcome to an Eye on the Hawks recap show with Mike Howell, who's been doing a lot of podcasting today, talking about the Ben McCollum hire earlier today. And now Mike Howell, joined by myself, Owen Sebring, to recap Iowa's second round NCAA tournament loss to Oklahoma, 96-62. And we're talking a little bit of history here with the Hawkeyes. Iowa's biggest loss in NCAA tournament history is 38 points from the 2002 season to a UConn team that Mike informed me featured both Diane Taurasi and Sue Bird. So a pretty formidable roster there at UConn in the 02 season. But just kind of a bit of irony is that Iowa team in 02 would have featured, I think that would have been maybe the sophomore season of Jenny Baranczyk on that roster. So kind of a weird turn of events. But Mike, I mean, just everything seemed to go against the Hawkeyes today. This season, the last few seasons, I don't know what time that I saw them just look this rough in one single game. Do you remember a time seeing them just look this flat from start to finish?
From start to finish, no. Before we recorded, I was like the second half of that US or South Carolina game last year. It was, but it ended up being a 12-point loss. And no, but when you just look at the play of just being outmatched, I guess Iowa had an early lead though. It really was that. I wrote it down. What was it? It was a 16-1 run when Iowa was up 10-4. Oklahoma just kind of turned it on. And after that, it was like, I was almost like, what's the point of even watching the rest of this game? You kind of saw what Oklahoma was able to do with their size. And we kind of talked about it on Saturday's podcast. That's the kind of thing that concerned us was Oklahoma's size. And the rebounding margin was just nuts. And it gave Oklahoma so many second chance points in that game. And it really was the difference. That and Iowa committed 20 turnovers. Which if you're going to beat a team that's better than you and you're a little outmatched, you can't be turning the ball over that much. And a lot of them were kind of like, I don't want to say careless because Oklahoma's
Yeah.
defense was active. It just was like out of place.
Yeah. Yeah. It was strange. I mean, even early, like as good as we've talked about Ava Hayden looking lately, it seems like Ava's early minutes, like she looked a little bit off, like there were balls kind of going to her that just were like kind of out of place or that she wasn't like reaching for or something. So things just didn't look quite right with her out there. It just seemed like everything was going wrong. I mean, you talk about the rebounding. What's weird is that Raegan Beers is Oklahoma's best player, like by far. And it's like Iowa did like a pretty decent job against Raegan Beers. Like she only scored 11 points. Yes, had 13 rebounds, but all in all, it's like, boy, if you had told Jan Jensen you're going to hold Raegan Beers to 11 points, you'd be like, okay, we should be in this thing. But she had 11, and then she was one of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Oklahoma players who finished in double figures. Just, I mean, you mentioned the turnovers. Field goal percentage was, I think, 10 points lower than what Iowa's averaged this entire season. They lost the assist battle, turnover battle, rebounding battle. They shot 20 fewer free throws than Oklahoma, which, like, I know there were weird or suspect calls during the game by some of the officiating, but like, I mean, maybe the one nice thing about a game like this, a loss like this, is that there's not like one thing that you can point to. Oh, if only this had been different. It's just
Mhm.
like everything went wrong today.
Yeah, you mentioned Raegan Beers. She got in early foul trouble, and you kind of like, okay, advantage Iowa when that happens. But Sahara Williams from Waterloo West, she scored 13 points all in the first quarter. And when I was looking at the box score at halftime, it was like, wow, like she's going to be the standout player of the game. But then who was it? Skylar Van kind of, I think she had the team high for them. But yeah, it was a weird turnaround once that 16-1 run came. But when you mentioned the calls, I know there were some questionable ones, and I know Jan Jensen in her post-game interview, I don't know if you ever got to watch because you were in the back with the players. She mentioned that in the entire regional, these two games, they only shot 11 free throws, and their opponents shot like 27 or something. So like
Wow.
she was trying to toe the line and not really, get fined or whatever. But though I know the one that stands out is Hannah's intentional foul when she scored a layup. Like
Yeah.
I'll say this, I don't know if you're able to see a replay because you were in the stadium or in the arena.
Yeah.
It was a weird motion that Hannah made.
Hmm.
Um, if it was anyone other than Hannah, because I know how genuine she is as a person, I would
Yeah.
have been like, okay, that's weird. But she's
Yeah.
also trying to make a bucket. And when you're trying to make a bucket, the last thing on your mind is smacking someone in the face. I think it was
Right.
just really an unfortunate, kind of unique, weird play.
Yeah. It's it was a strange way that her arm was moving, but like Hannah's somebody who like um I hope this doesn't come off the wrong way, but it's like her body just moves in a way that like sometimes when she's making baskets, like she can make some like weird movements when she's going to the hoop. Like she'll kind of like throw her body around and like her arm can go at like strange angles. So I think that's all it was. Like she's like just kind of reaching up to try to throw it in, and the other arm just kind of happened to fly back in a strange manner. And boy, have you ever gotten hit in the nose like that? I'm like, she just went down like she just gotten hit with some buckshot or something. I mean, she just like was on the floor, like sobbing. Like I just could not believe how bad it seemed like it was. And there wasn't even any blood in that play. And she came back and played, so must not have been broken or anything. So I'm like, how were you down for that long? She made it seem like that was the worst injury.
No, yeah, I actually have. I played soccer in high school and a ball into my face. And when you get hit like that, it's just automatic. Like your eyes start watering and you can't see anything. So I kind of feel that. I understand that. But yeah, it was just a weird play. And you kind of, it's unfortunate that it happened to Hannah because, she even said in the post game, like, I don't play like that. And you believe her because she's one of the,
Yeah.
like I said, one of the most genuine people in college basketball.
Yeah. Yeah. She was asked about that, and she was just like, yeah, the refs just told me that like my arm had swung backwards and hit her. And I mean, we had to ask the question, like, was it intentional? Like, and we all knew the answer, obviously not. Not that I don't think anybody out there would have done that. I don't think there was anybody on the floor that would be capable of something like that. But yeah, just a strange moment. And I don't know. It sounded like the TV announcers had said that they thought that it was the right call to say it was an intentional foul. Was that right?
They not only said it was the right call, and I don't know, I can't remember who was calling the game, but they actually said it was intentional. Like they thought it was when she was shooting a layup. And I was almost got out of my seat at work and I was like, what are you talking about? Like it clearly was not. First off, if you're trying to make a layup and you're down, why would
Mhm.
you do that?
Mhm.
Second off, like I feel like when you watch her go up, you know that she's just trying to contort her body to go under the hoop.
Yeah,
So,
making a
and did
perfect layup.
that remind me if
Make
I'm correct me if I'm wrong. Did that lead directly to Jan's T or was that a different play?
I don't re it may have. I only know because like I was back in the media room working on some other stuff during the third quarter when that happened, so that's why I saw some replays. So, and I know I did not see Jan's T, so that might have been in direct succession of that. But
Okay. Yeah. I seem to remember that because then they got the free throws for the intentional foul. And then when Jan was complaining to the ref, they teed her up for it was either that call or some other call. And I'm sure people in the comments are going to talk about that. But yeah, that was another unfortunate kind of swing there when Jan got a technical.
yeah, yeah, and there were so many moments where you hope that there was something that was going to be the swing, like either that or like I saw Jan like talking to Lucy on the side, like really like kind of giving her a motivational speech, and a lot of moments where I thought, okay, maybe now is going to be when Iowa makes a push, but like there was just never any push, like it just never happened. And I mean, you probably credit more Oklahoma with that. Like Iowa was trying, and I mean, they did turn the ball over in some uncharacteristic ways. But I mean, after the game, the players just said like, Oklahoma just came out with a perfect game plan. They came out and Sahara had a great first quarter, and then they transitioned to somebody else and let them take over. And it's just like they just had Iowa figured out from start to finish in that game.
Yeah, that's how it felt. And you could definitely tell Oklahoma was the better team in that. And that's kind of the sad part when you're looking at the season. And it took a few games for Iowa to really find themselves. That 5 game losing streak really hurt because if you're not a 6 seed and you
Mhm.
creep up to the 5 or 4 seed, you're not facing a team like this until possibly the second weekend. And that's where being a higher seed really matters. Like you don't have to face a good Oklahoma team, which will be interesting to see how they play next week against UConn, which I don't think they actually won by the time we're recording this, but I'm assuming they're going to win.
Safe bet going up against the Jackrabbits. Yeah, and overall, the Big Ten like did not look great today in women's basketball. Some final scores from the Big Ten: Texas beat Illinois 65 to 48. NC State hammer Michigan State 89 to, or excuse me, 83 to 49. Um, Maryland was losing bad to Alabama, but came back and won in double overtime, 111 to 108. But yeah, somebody replied to one of my posts and said like, Iowa needs to schedule some SEC teams in the season so they can like get used to that level of physicality or something. And I'm like, I mean, they did play Tennessee, they did lose, but obviously it was a close one. They played, obviously some outstanding teams in USC and UCLA. So do you think that Iowa's caliber of schedule makes a difference in a game like this. I would say that that is definitely the case in football. Like we've seen that when Iowa goes up against SEC teams in the postseason. But do you think that there's anything to that with women's basketball?
I'm not so sure. Like you said, they did have a tough game against Tennessee. They're playing UConn next year. They had the Virginia Tech game, which I think some people thought Virginia Tech would be a little better than this season. They played, albeit Big 12, Kansas. In the past, they played Kansas State, who's been a really good team. Um,
Iowa
and
State.
Iowa State, obviously. I don't think that's a major criticism. I think, you know, one other thing today was the outside shot really wasn't there for the most part. There were a lot of open looks that were missed. And um, so I think if you do hit some shots, maybe it's a closer game. I mean, they lost by 30 today, so who's to say?
Yeah.
Although they did shoot 40% from three today, but it
Yeah.
was 10 of 25.
Actually better than their season average. Yeah. Yeah, a couple of bright spots is like, hey, Kylie Feuerbach had a really nice game. Like Kylie started off and had a couple of early threes, finished with 14 points, 6 boards, 4 of 6 on 3-pointers. Lucy played really well. I mean, relatively, at least scoring wise, had 20 points. 3-point shooting was what kind of kept Iowa in the game early, or the lack thereof from Oklahoma. Oklahoma started like I mean, they missed like their first 8 3-pointers or something.
Mhm.
I think they were like 2 of 17 in the first half, something like that. And then they cleaned that up and made 9 in the second half. And I mean, it was I mean, half empty building, frankly, down here in Norman for this second round game. I'm like, Sooner fans, like your team's about to go to Sweet 16 for the first time in a dozen years, and like you guys can't show up and like fill this arena out a little bit better. Like, what's going on? But nevertheless, like, yeah, that building for the people that were inside of it really made it feel like a good home atmosphere that seemed to really swing things for them.
I also don't think like early season games, just a couple more, would get you physically ready for a game in March. The fact of the matter is, Oklahoma was bigger, they were stronger, and they out physicaled Iowa. I mean, the points in the paint, 38 to 24. That kind of seemed to get Oklahoma out of that early funk when they were down 10-4. It was like, all right, we can't shoot today. We're gonna go to the paint, and they were getting pretty much whatever bucket they wanted. So I
Yeah.
think that was the turning point when they started to figure out that they're bigger than this team. They can abuse them, and they did.
Yep. Anything from like I know you listen to a lot of the post game interviews. Anything that stuck out is something interesting. Obviously, Sydney Falter was super emotional, which she was last year too. I remember after their championship game loss, Sydney was super emotional as well. But
Mhm.
just like I don't know, this was featured as part of my story that I had for the show tonight. But like Sydney feels like just kind of a special player to this program, like somebody who, like, as we've discussed before, we don't know if the Final Four run last year happens without Sydney's performance against West Virginia. We don't know if Iowa wins a Big Ten championship last year without Sydney. Like and this year, every single player has talked about her leadership, her being a teacher to the young players, her scoring and rebounding has been so big. Just like I don't know, we all love Sid, but it's like I think that there is something about her that makes her like kind of have a special place in Hawkeye history.
Yeah, she's kind of reminds me of Kate Martin a little bit with that. And remember this last year, heading into the Big Ten tournament, Molly Davis got hurt in one of the last games of the season. I think the last regular season against Ohio State. And where there were questions about whether she could come in and start and be like a hindrance or, like positive. And
Yeah.
looking back now, it kind of seems a little silly to think that we think of her that way. But she really was kind of like this team's glue. One of the things that stood out when Hannah was talking, and I'm going to post it later on our Eye on the Hawks Twitter page, when Chad Leistico asked Hannah about Sydney, how emotional she got.
Yeah.
It almost made me emotional just because I think, along with Sid, a lot of Hawkeye fans love Hannah.
Mhm.
But the way she choked up and in the middle of her response, she's like, she had to step up and lead this team. And she's like, I'm going to have to do that. She's already assuming that role. Obviously, she'll be one of the seniors next year, along with a few other players. But you can see that, Sydney's leadership really rubbed off on Hannah Stolke, too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I feel like she's maybe like the player on this roster that's going to be the most missed. Like Lucy being gone is important, but like, we think have a big score coming in and Addie Deal. But it's like Sydney just had such like tenacity and like that player who is, again, diving after loose balls and who's like, undersized, but is coming in and getting 14 rebounds a game. Like, I just don't know. Right now, I don't know if I see somebody on the roster that's quite like that. Maybe, somebody like Taylor or Stremlo, I could see maybe turning into something like that. But that's just the biggest piece of the puzzle that I think is going to be unfortunately missing from the roster next year.
Yeah, definitely. And something that, and I'd have to look at the recruits too, but I think they get a couple other bigs. One thing when Iowa season ends the past 3 years, it's been size, size, size. And with Jan being the head coach and she's a post player, there really needs to be an emphasis. It seems Iowa's been a little smaller, been able to move. They obviously with Caitlin Clark, it was a little easier to win like that. But man, they just get beat up by teams that are bigger. And I mean, I guess they almost beat UCLA, who has Lauren Betts and some other big players. But it seems to me those are kind of the differences in the past few years when I was lost in the tournament.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough because like, I mean, same goes for the men's side where it's like in the WNBA, they're going kind of to a positionless game where like being a big post player is like not really what teams are looking for. But like in college, like that's what helps you get to a Final Four, is having a really big dominant post player. We saw that with Megan. Obviously, didn't make the Final Four, but like got to the Elite Eight. Like a post player is just like so huge in women's college basketball. And yeah, that's kind of what's been missing the last few years. Even though Monica was a great player, but like I don't think anybody would say like, oh yeah, she's like all American caliber. And that's hopefully what they're getting, with Ava Hayden getting older and getting more experience. I think that they might have that with her a little bit more. She's still a little undersized compared to, if she's going up against Lauren Betts or something, but she can still hang with them. And then yeah, some of the other players are having coming in. I'm curious to see what they get out of the portal. I think a lot of people would like to see them maybe go after Sarah Williams from Wisconsin, see if they could bring her down to Iowa City. But yeah, it seems like that is going to be the biggest need for this team over the next couple seasons.
And I had to Google it, but Layla Hayes, four-star center from Alaska, she's 6'5", so that will add some size next year. You got to think that she gets immediate minutes, maybe in an Ava Hayden role. But with Ava taking that next leap, you think they'd probably start Ava and Hannah at that 4 and 5. Didn't really do that much, that lineup a lot this year. Saw it a little bit today. Was not effective, but I think it was the flow of the game where Oklahoma was just taking control more so than that lineup specifically. But hopefully you'll get to see more size in the future. I did want to point out when we're talking about Sydney Falter, her stat line today, she didn't score any points, still 9 rebounds and 5 assists, like 5 assists away from double double and a rebound. But it would have been kind of crazy if she got double double without scoring a point.
That's true.
But that's just kind of the player she is. If she's not shooting, she's still impacting this team.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd encourage anybody to go. I mean, if you're watching this, you found our YouTube page. So hopefully you can get on there and watch the full interviews post game with those players. Cause yeah, you could hear the emotional Sid Falter, emotional Hannah Stolke talking about Sid. And then Taylor McCabe, I've never really seen her wear her emotions on her sleeve, but talked to her as well. And she had, yeah, obviously just glowing things to say about Sid as well. So I'm curious who steps into kind of that glue role. Kylie Feuerbach could maybe be that person next year, but that's something that they've had the last few years. Obviously, Kate Martin was her nickname was the glue, and that she filled that role, and Sid did that this year. So I'm curious to see now who does that next year.
Yeah, it'll be something to develop over, the next 30 minutes or so. While we're here though, Owen, women's basketball season ending, the men's basketball season ended a few weeks ago. Mitch and I did a podcast on, Ben McCollum getting hired this morning, and you weren't able to join us. So I thought this is the perfect time to get your thoughts on the hire from Drake and Ben McCollum, unless you had any more women's basketball takes before we get off that time.
I'm all taked out, I think, on women's basketball for the moment. So, yeah, we can make that transition. Yeah, Ben. I mean, I've missed out on a lot of the drama being down here for the last 3 or 4 days, just because like I'm kind of focusing all my energy on the women's team, and so I'm seeing posts, I'm seeing reporters saying some things, and then other reporters saying other things. So I never know what to believe. But I was glad they got the deal done. Somebody, I'll just I guess leave him nameless, but somebody had mentioned that like he didn't know if the Hawkeyes would make the hire until Tuesday, just to kind of like allow the women to be the focal point for now. But obviously went for that hire today and got it out there. And so it seems like everybody loves it. Like I'm sure people are out there that will dislike the hire for one reason or another, but by and large, it seems like Hawkeye fans love this guy already. They've seen that he's a proven winner everywhere he goes. He's an Iowa kid. You kind of pointed out to me, Mike, the other week that like, we Iowans always kind of like to look for like, oh, well, who's the guy with Iowa ties? Who's been in the state before? And so that is just kind of funny how we always kind of look for that connection right away. But that's what they went with. They went the kid who was born in Iowa City, who went to Storm Lake St. Mary's, and so a kid who knows the state well. And yeah, seems like he's like the fit, and he's going to have everything at his fingertips in Iowa City.
Yeah, still working to see what that deal is worth and see, I've seen numbers floated out about an NIL package from anywhere from 3 to, close to $5 million, which would really help. Something that Fran was not getting in his time. Um, I will say though that I'm very excited for the future of the men's basketball program, for the future of the women's basketball program, and I do think this hire really will propel the men. Not only is he an Iowan, he's just probably one of the best coaches on the market. Lower level, obviously, he's coming up from D2, then to Drake, 131 games. Um, I said it on our podcast this morning. If you want to check it out, I think it'll be more challenged to jump from Drake to Iowa than Division 2 to Drake, and we'll have to see. But the one reason they couldn't wait until Tuesday to announce this hire is because the transfer portal opens today, and we need to get, or Ben needs to get on the hit the ground running.
Yeah.
And there's only 5 players on the roster. They've updated the roster actually. If you go on the Hawkeye website, and there's only 5 players on it so far. So
Wait,
um,
let me see if I can guess who's still on there. Um, Traore hasn't entered the
he's on
portal.
there. Yep.
Okay. Um, there's a kid who is he number 14? He's this kid, little white kid who I'd never heard his name before, but I was like, he must be on there.
Wasn't 14 Carter Kingsbury?
Oh, was that him?
He is on the roster though.
Kingsbury is?
Yeah.
Isn't he done? I thought he was done.
I
He
thought he
might be.
was too, but it says he's a redshirt senior next year. They updated their classes.
Ah, let's see. Is there anybody else who I've seen? I don't know. Who else is on the roster?
Chris Tajo, Trey Buchanan, who is the GM or the son of the GM of the Indiana Pacers. And now I'm blanking on the fifth one.
Trey Buchanan is the one that I was like, I have never heard this person's name in my entire life. Who the heck is Trey Buchanan? But
Yeah.
hey, he's sticking around. Yeah, that's interesting. So, do you think? I mean, I guess I haven't seen if it's confirmed, but I saw somebody posted like both Sturts and a freshman from Drake are coming. They're going to follow McCollum to Iowa City. Like, is that
Jacob Koch is the other one. Just to
who
get
is
that
it?
out.
Of
Jacob Koch. He was a freshman last year.
course.
No, I saw that post too. My friend who's really connected to Drake, he works at Colorado State, actually, kind of funny because he works he's in the athletic department, and so he has been telling me some things, but at least just as a basketball fan. He told me Nico was going to Minnesota like 2 weeks ago. He didn't have any info. He's just like, he's a Minnesota kid. We kind of all assume he hasn't talked to him or anything like that, but he well connected with the Drake program. He was in Wichita this past week for the tournament, went to Arch Madness. He said the guy that posted it is like knows what he's talking about. But again, I'm gonna wait for something official
Yeah.
to wait to see if Bennett Sturts and I think that it's Isaiah something, the freshman that said is gonna follow him. But we'll have to
Who
see.
who do you think leaves Iowa and who stays?
I think well, Brock and Owen, I think, are gone. I actually just saw Brock Harding had his list of 3 schools: Washington, Louisville, and TCU, I believe. He's on a visit to TCU. So those two I think are gone for sure, 100%. And there's reports of Owen getting some, 7-figure deals at various schools on the rumor mill. You can check Twitter for that. I think Josh Dix is probably gone just because I think the opportunity he's going to get. I haven't seen him go take any visits yet. He might have, but he really could play pretty much anywhere. I think 50-50 shot for Price, Sanford, and Cooper Koch. I
Hmm.
really think those two will listen. And Ben McCollum is a basketball guru, and I think they maybe already talked today, who knows. I wonder
Yeah.
who Bennett's first calls were, or sorry, Ben's first calls were today. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I really do wonder about even Josh. I'm just like, if Iowa could put together a competitive NIL package, I feel like all the players would love having been there. Like, I don't know if there would be a shot at keeping Josh Dix. Like, it seems like the odds are against it, but I don't know, the right guy is in place to potentially make that land if they want to. Who do you think next year? Maybe this is an easy question to answer, but you can pretend to think about it at least. Which team do you think next year ends with more wins, the men's or women's team?
That's a good question. The women's team, in some ways, is going to have another rebuilding year, or not, I shouldn't say rebuilding, reloading year too, because their top scorer is leaving,
Mhm.
and their glue girl with Sydney. Um, that's a really good question. I'd have to see their schedule first. I know Iowa State probably will, or Iowa State, the Iowa women will probably have a tougher one because they already have UConn, and they're probably going to have another marquee game on the schedule. Um, I'm gonna say, the safe bet's the women, so I'm gonna go with them. I
Yeah.
think Ben McCollum in his first year, I have to wait to see who the roster is gonna be, but I think they have a good shot at making the tournament just um, with his basketball acumen and the way he coaches and the way he was able to make it work at Drake with the full new roster. But I just have so much faith in Jan Jensen that she's gonna get this team ready to go next year that I think they'll probably, I bet it'll be close though.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it. I think that I too would guess the women just because I think that, based on what they have coming back, bringing in Addie Deal, I think that she'll make a difference right away. I mean, she could, I'm not saying that she'll be Caitlin her freshman year, but I think that she is somebody that right away could put up 15 to 18 points a game. And I have my fingers crossed that they could land somebody splashy in the transfer portal. Somebody that really, again, could come in and be a starter right away. Maybe not like the premier player out of the portal, but again, a Sarah Williams type or something. But it is kind of weird wanting Sarah Williams now because I'm like, you do have Hannah, you have Ava who's developing well, you have Layla Hayes who's coming in as a freshman, like that could get minutes right away. So I'm like, do you need like another post player in there as well? It doesn't hurt to have another one, but it's getting a little bit log jammed at that point if you bring in Sarah Williams.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah Williams from Wisconsin would be a huge pickup. And Jan did say in her post-game press conference that um, she will be obviously every coach has to look in the portal to see how they can make their team better. And, even though you have young players in the post, she's a proven commodity, right? More so than Ava Hayden, even though she's had a good week.
Mhm.
Sarah's done it for, however many years that she's been 3, 4 years that she's been in Wisconsin. So, I mean, if that's available, I think you got to take it just because it'll make your team better. And
Mhm.
there's also years on the back end for Layla and Ava. So it will be interesting to see, who they prioritize in the portal.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think their biggest thing is they might need is a shooting guard or something. Like, maybe somebody that is like, I don't I don't know. I mean, we like all their players and so we think like, oh no, Taylor McCabe's gonna be good, Kylie Fearback's gonna be good, but if they have somebody who's like a deadly three-point shooter, it'd be good to pick somebody like that up in the portal. Because I think Addie's gonna run the point next year. So kind of curious to see, yeah, how the rest of it shapes out. But that is a discussion for Mike and I to have in October. Uh,
2 quick points. I just looked on Twitter. Josh Dix and Owen Freeman were supposedly visiting Creighton this week, and another account says that Illinois is heavily pursuing him too. So
yeah.
hopefully he doesn't move in conference for any Hawkeye fans out there. Creighton would be a good spot. I kind of like the Blue Jays and like watching them play. So
Does Creighton have enough? I mean, are they that loaded in NIL that they could afford both Josh and Owen?
they've got a really good NIL collective. And remember, they don't have a football team. So
Right.
all of their boosters are, pumping into basketball. I've heard it on the college basketball podcast I listen to, Eye on College Basketball. It's a CBS one. And they talk about how well a lot of Big East schools are positioned,
Mhm.
especially if the House settlement gets passed this summer.
Mhm.
Schools will be able to pay up to $20 million out through all their sports. And you got to think those teams that don't have football, like they have a huge chunk to work with and it could really inflate some players. So I think they do. Obviously, I don't know their numbers specifically, but they're one of the schools that, doesn't have to compete with football for the NIL. So they've got a lot of money to work with in downtown Omaha.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how it goes over there in Nebraska. I always hear about that all the boosters throw all their football money at Nebraska football and then throw all their basketball money and tickets to Creighton basketball.
Mhm.
So yeah, I suppose there's a lot of opportunities to be had there. Boy, that would be interesting to see both those Iowa kids go over there and play for Cascade's own Greg McDermott. So yeah, does your buddy who works at Colorado State, does he have any ideas about where Ollie for Oakmanesh is going to end up?
I haven't asked him about that, but I did hear from someone else that he would get the Colorado State job.
Like the head job.
Yeah, that's what not from my guy who works there, but I've heard from rumors, nothing official, but I think it was on the two guys with Chris Hassel and Chris Williams. They think he's going to get that job.
Yeah, he's been in the system for a while. Like he was at Nebraska for a while. He was at Colorado State for a while. Like he's a guy who's been around college
Mhm.
basketball long enough in an assistant coaching role that it seems like it's about his time to do something. And I think he's still pretty young. Well, he's maybe a year or two younger than me, so he's probably like 36, 37, something like that. So could be about time for the graduate of Iowa City West and Indian Hills Community College and Kirkwood Community College and the University of Northern Iowa. All four Eastern Iowa schools represented by Ollie.
Really hitting the transfer portal before the transfer portal happened, huh?
That's true. Yeah. All right. Well, let's put a wrap on this. Again, an unfortunate way for the season to end. It's like it's again, as I mentioned, it kind of softens the blow when it's a blowout like this in your last game. It's just like, it's almost worse when it's a buzzer beater or something. Uh,
Hmm.
but still an unfortunate way to see a season like this end with a lot of players that people really, fell in love with over the season. So hate to see Sid go out like that, but that's the way it goes. And Oklahoma, I think, ingratiated themselves to Hawkeye fans. I think a lot of Iowa fans really like Oklahoma. I mean, Jenny Baranczyk is like still a Hawkeye at heart in a lot of ways, and so I think they really like and respect her for bringing out the 52 pins that they did to honor Jamie KB Lang today. So I think there's a lot of like good feelings, a good relationship between Iowa and Oklahoma. So I think that Hawkeye fans have no problem, hoping that they could somehow knock off UConn next week. So we'll put a wrap on this, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing from us on Eye on the Hawks sometime soon with football coming up. We've got spring games happening and a lot more to be talked about with football. So thanks again for joining us. Make sure you check out all our social medias with YouTube and X and Facebook and Instagram. You can look up Eye on the Hawks or Iowa News Now to see our latest content. So thanks for joining us. For Mike Howell, I'm Owen Sebring, and we'll see you again next time on Eye on the Hawks.